Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Level TV Reviews, and this is GreyHunter bringing to you Crusader Kings II. So Crusader Kings II, what is Crusader Kings II? It's the 2012 release of the sequel to Crusader Kings I. Crusader Kings I, which if anyone remembers, was a buggy as shit game that Paradox ended up releasing because somebody else didn't bother finishing it. This is not the same game, not even close. This game is so much better in so many ways, and I'm going to explain to you how that is so. So first off, what do you do in this game? Well, unlike most other Paradox titles, and there's God knows how many of them, unlike most other Paradox titles, you don't play as a country in this one. You play as a ruler. Or more specifically, you play as a family. So in our case, we're playing as the Dahakor family, which is a custom dynasty that I've created for my LP, which I'll throw a link in for at the bottom if you want to see how the game is played. I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but if you want to have a look and see how the game is played, feel free to click on the link. Anyway, you play as a dynasty. So in our case, we're playing as the Dahakors, but you can choose any dynasty in the world except pagans. You can't play as pagans yet. But The Old Gods is an upcoming DLC which will let you play as the older pagans. So let's have a look. You can go through all these multiple filters, and like all good Paradox games, there's so very many of them. There's the default terrain, which just, makes the map look pretty. There's Independent Realms, which shows you independent realms. That one's kind of obvious. That includes rebel states, like in our case here, Toulouse. Toulouse is not part of France in this one, they're rebelling. You can look at diplomacy, so basically how everyone feels about you. Green is obviously good, yellow is kind of meh, and red obviously is bad. I don't think we have any red though. No, we haven't pissed anyone off. Not for lack of trying though, not for lack of trying. You can always look at the religions if you want to, so Catholic. Obviously Catholicism is very, very dominant in the Middle Ages, because, it's the Middle Ages, but you've got also the Sunnis, which are kind of Muslims, Shia, which is also another kind of Muslim, Ibadi, I'm not quite sure if that's pagan or not. No, it's Muslim, and pagans. And obviously there's different types of pagans. So there's the Tengri, there's Sumenusko. Someone's going to crucify me for saying that wrong. Haha, religious joke! Anyway, there's various different religions, obviously, and then you can look at cultures. So Russians, commies, Russian commies, Cumans, Greeks, Levantines, Bedouin, Egyptians, Normans, Franks, Occitans, Castilians, Portuguese, everything. There's a little bit of everything in this game, and it's brilliant because of it. Now you can always look at your economy as well. Again, green is good, red is bad. You can look also at the de jure duchies, so this is very handy for when you're playing as a character who has many titles and you need to hand them out to various sons or something like that. And it shows you, the de jure borders. De jure meaning, of course, by law. De facto meaning by fact. You can also do that for kingdoms, and that'll show you how everything is affected. This isn't going to be a very, 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 very in-depth review, because trying to do an in-depth review of this game would take hours, and we don't have hours. We have up to about half an hour, I think. I don't want to have this drag on for too long, otherwise, I'll bombard you with information, and it's no good for anybody. But you can look at how different areas drift. So in this case, the Duchy of Normandy is being incorporated by law into the Kingdom of England, so it's at 92 out of 100 years. Right now it's de facto, so by fact, in the Kingdom of England, but eventually it'll become de jure. So that's an interesting thing there. Also, you have empires. So Russia, obviously, the Byzantines, Hispania, Francia, Britannia, the Holy Roman Empire, again, the Arabian Empire, the Persian Empire, there's empires everywhere. Scandinavia even has an empire. You can also look at how the revolt risk is. Again, this is sort of tied into diplomatic stuff, so it's whether or not people like their liege, but also this one has to do with rebels, so local rebels, peasants and the like. You can look at your dynasties as well if you wanted to, but that's mainly for the ruling family. So in our case, the de Normandys. In bits of Scotland, the Dunkelds, and the other bits, the MacDougall. I don't know. Somebody will correct me on that one too, I'm sure. The Jimenez, the von Babenbergs, etc., etc. You can also look at opinions, which is sort of diplomatic as well. It's just a fancy way of showing how your vassals feel about you, but it's kind of interesting. Direct vassals shows you how the breakdown is in different countries. So in England, obviously, Normandy rules all of this. Normandy's very powerful in this one. And they've also got that little bit of Ireland. You can look at the Republic trade zones, which basically is really only useful if you're playing as a Republic, but it shows you where you can, where they control, basically, and who controls it, because in the Republics, there are several different families vying for the control of the Republic. Makes sense. I don't really like playing as a Republic, so we're not going to focus on them. At least not for this. And you can look at family trade zones if you want to break down how the families work. But it took away these ones here, so I'm not sure if it's all that reliable as a map filter. But you've got so many of these things, and that's just the mini-map. We've spent like 5 minutes just on the mini-map. So we'll put it back to terrain for a minute and explain how the game actually works. So you've got your player character, and the way this works is you play as the family. So if we go back to our family's beginning, we began with Earl William. So Earl William was our current character's grandfather. When he died, we moved on and we played our father, who's Nathaniel. And then when he died, we moved on again and we played as us. So when we die, we'll move on again and play as our son. And when he dies, we'll play as our grandson. And when he dies, we'll play as his son. So it's very much about family, and an important thing to note is that you do have to manage how you marry. So our son, right now, is married to some lady called Aneska, which just makes me think of Vampire the Masquerade, and they've had some kids. But if she dies, you have to arrange another marriage for him. So it's very important that you maintain a knowledge of how your family is running. Now, as for who you'll be playing, you can play as an established family in history, or you can play as a custom character if you've got the Ruler Designer DLC, which I do, so I'm playing as the Hardcores, and if you look at my LP, you'll see that they are a ruler-designed family. That usually is only beneficial to the first couple of generations because, you know, you're playing as a tailored character. But it shows the sort of freedom that you have in a Paradox game. You can do almost anything you like. So let's go on to the different elements that are here. You've got obviously your money, which you use to buy improvements for your personal domain. Just think of that as domain. Demesne is... I don't know where they were going with that. It's probably the medieval term for it, but just think personal holdings. So you've got your money, which obviously you use to upgrade those personal holdings, pay for mercenaries, pay for soldiers when you're at war, pay for your retinues, which are basically your personal household troops, available if you've got the Legacy of Rome DLC, and all that sort of fun stuff. Next to that, you've got the prestige score. This is basically just how prestigious you are, how famous you are, what have you done, and obviously that's affected by how many places you hold personally, how many people swear fealty to you, what your job is. So in this case, we've got the Stewardship of England, so we get a little bonus there. If you're in primogeniture, which is an important thing, you've got a landless son's penalty if your son doesn't have any land, which in our case, he doesn't. And then you've got technology score, which is basically how advanced you are. That's what majesty is. Next to that, you've got piety, which is how the church views you. It's not really important in the context of a lot of your actions, but it can be useful if the Pope decides that he's going to excommunicate you, or if one of your vassals decides that just for shits and giggles, they'll excommunicate you, because they like to do that. You also need piety to form titles, so if we have a look here, we can't do it at the moment because we don't have the prerequisites, but if there's a kingdom such as the Kingdom of Brittany, that's not formed yet, you can create the kingdom. You have to be independent to do it, obviously, or a king already, but you need to pay some money, and you need to pay piety to create this kingdom. And obviously there's going to be a few special creation conditions for this one, so you have to have the culture group of Celtic. We don't, we're Norman, so we have Latin. And you also need to hold 50% of the de jure land. So if you remember, I mentioned that before, de jure land is stuff that belongs to that country by law. So that's very important, and then you can see what part of the empire they are. So they're part of the Empire of Francia, which includes Aquitaine, Burgundy, and France. Not important for the purposes of this review, but you get the idea. It's a very expansive game. Next to that, we've got our domain size, demesne size again, and that is basically how much land you can personally hold before taxation becomes inefficient and people start hating you. So you've got a base of 1 because you need to hold some land. You've got a duke rank in our case, a great duke because we hold more than one duchy title, a stewardship bonus, which I'll explain in a minute, and a legalism score, which is again a bit of technology. Next to that, you've got how big your realm is. This doesn't really play any part. It's basically just your holdings plus those of your vassals, and it tells you how many lands in total you hold. Basically means absolutely nothing. And obviously here, this is your score. So this is the score that they put at the end of your game, or whenever you resign, and they compare you to a set of famous families that they've assigned arbitrary scores to. I don't quite get the point of having a score mechanic. I guess it's just so you can see how well you did, but the scores aren't really all that difficult to beat. And here obviously you've got the date, so this is the pause and unpause button as well, and here you can set how fast your time goes, how slow it goes, and obviously you've got the current date so you know when you are. Under that, you've got your priority messages, so you can designate things that you want to be high priority and low priority. Generally, high priority is diplomatic stuff, so the king has declared someone is a rebel, the king has won his war against somebody else, etc, etc. Someone arrived at your court. This one, low priority, is mainly for something has been built in your holdings. So say we went to Mortain, which is our capital, and we chose to build the castle moat. If we click there, spend some of our money, we say yes, sure, we'll build that moat. Once it's done, so on the 14th of September 1177, so in about 7 months from now, no, not 7 months, 5 months, I think. No, 6. I'm so derpy today. In 6 months, you'd get a message here saying that a shallow moat has been built in Mortain. Rejoice. And that basically would just tell you how that you've improved your holding. Underneath that, obviously, in this little box, you've got your domain size and your armies. So currently armies is just one thing. That's because this is our retinue and not actually an army of levies or anything like that. But we'll get to that later. I know I'm saying that, I'm almost halfway through the half hour that I assigned for this, but hey, I'm almost halfway through it, we can get there. So, Mortain is our capital, it's also one of our holdings, and we personally hold Mortain. These just swear fealty to us. Nothing important there. And the Norman army, well, we already explained that. So what does this all mean? It seems very daunting to you all, I'm sure, at this point in time. What does it all mean? Well, that's just your realm. That's just the map, and the obvious little bits here. When it becomes complicated, well, that's this stuff. So, to rule over your country, for want of a better word, you've got yourself as the ruler, and then you've got your council of guys. These are basically your helpers. So, the Chancellor is your diplomatic dude. He goes out and he either improves diplomatic relations, tries to fabricate a claim on something for you, or sows dissent between vassal and their liege lord. The one that you'll probably be using the most is fabricating claims, and that's generally how you'll get more land. because I know some of you are already thinking that. How do you get all this land? Well, you fabricate claims on it, or you inherit them. Next up, you got your marshal. Your marshal is basically your go-to guy for sword fighting, and you can suppress revolts with him, train troops, or research military tech. All very cool. You can also lead your armies, and he's generally your best martial guy, so a marshal. So he's generally your best commander, because you want your best commander in charge of stuff. So he's often very, very good at fighting. Next up, you got your steward. They're basically your tax collector, your accountant, that sort of guy. So you can collect taxes, oversee construction, which speeds it up, or you can research economy tech. And economy tech is very important. You'll see why soon. Then you've got your spy master. He's basically your plots guy. The guy who decides, let's stick our knife in that fella. He's good at stuff like that. He can scheme, which basically stops vassals from plotting against you, or you can get a vassal to join you in a faction if you should happen to have one. And of course, you can have accidents, which are not good. Then you've got building spy networks, which is basically just keeping tabs on people. It makes assassinations easier, so this is the very cloak and daggery thing. And then you've got stealing technology. Stealing technology is vital, because you need to maintain a technological edge. It's technology. If you have better technology than everyone else, you're better. Simple as that. And then you've got your court chaplain. Your court chaplain is basically your priest. So if you've got heretics around, you can send him to convert them. You can research cultural tech with him, which is kind of important as well. Or you can improve religious relations, generally with the Pope or some bishops who don't like you. So that's the council. Then you've got laws. Laws. You can make them. So you'll be able to set how many feudal levies you take, whether or not you tax your feudal vassals, city levies, city taxes, church levies, and church taxes. Basically, this sort of stuff is just how much money you make and how many troops you can call. Very important, but not overly so. This is the important bit. This is inheritance laws. You can set gender laws, so you can rule out females from being part of the laws, part of the succession chain, or you can include them with agnatic cognatic, or if you're Spanish, particularly Basque, you can have absolute cognatic, where men and women inherit on equal terms. And then of course you've got your different types, so elective monarchy, ultimogenitor, primogenitor. Ultimogenitor is the opposite of primo, means youngest kid inherits. Elective means people elect you. Seniority means oldest person in the realm, who's part of your dynasty inherits, which can be kind of awkward. And then Gavelkind, where everything gets split. Obviously, the further you go, you'll get different laws, like if you're the king, you get these two. You get crown authority and investiture, so who gets to choose your bishops, and how much control you have over the land. All very important, because obviously without laws, your realm doesn't function. Technology, this is the important one. Sort of. You can't outwardly influence this like you can in a lot of Paradox games. You basically just set a focus, and it gets researched. It goes up a little bit every year, but you can only set 3 focuses, so 1 in military, 1 in economy, and 1 in culture. So we've got some focuses in military organization, basically how good we can recruit, and how big the supply limit is, so how quickly we can put soldiers there, and how big our stacks can be before we start suffering attrition. Castle infrastructure is the other focus, which is basically how big we can build our castles, how awesomely fortified we can be. And then legalism, which is how big we can have a domain. Kind of important. But this one is the one that you'll probably be using a fair bit. This is military. If you have the Legacy of Rome DLC, you can raise retinues, you get a retinue cap, and you can raise a permanent standing army within that retinue cap. Very useful, because they're an army that you don't have to pay after you've already paid for them the first time, and they're an army that's always there. Then you've got your army levies, so basically your holdings, how many men they generate for you, your vassals, how many men they generate for you, and people you've hired, so mercenaries and holy orders. And of course you've got fleets, so galleys, ships. You can hire mercenary ships as well if you want to. And speaking of mercenaries, you've got a bunch of them to choose from. You've got ships, obviously, then you've got actual mercenary bands. Very important, because occasionally you won't have enough men to fight off somebody by yourself, so you'll need to hire some. You can also get holy orders if you wanted to, but beware buying them because they cost piety, which is pretty much the only other use for them, as in piety. And once you've got them, you can only use them against people who are not of your faith. Well, specifically people who are not Catholic. Orthodox and Muslim and pagans are fine, but never hire them when you're fighting against a Catholic because they'll do nothing for you. Kind of interesting. Intrigue. Intrigue is an important one. This is what you'll be doing 90% of the time. You'll be plotting to do something, in our case killing some duke who wants to take our land, as you can see in the plots. Or you can plot to kill your wife, kill other people, etc. So let's just end this one here for a second. You can choose a plot. You can revoke counties within your domain. In our case, because we're a duke, we can do that with a few counties. You can kill somebody who's standing in the way of your inheritance. So she's the heir to a county, which if she dies, we would become the heir. Or you can see your wife dead. Sometimes there's a point to that. If they're too old to have children anymore, you might want to kill them so you can marry somebody else who can have children and then secure your line of succession. All very important things. And then you've got decisions. Decisions are ones where you can generate people, so generate a female courtier, generate a male courtier, generate a priest. You can convert to your liege's culture if you don't happen to be the same culture. So in our case, because we're Norman and he's English, we can convert to becoming English. It costs you a bit of prestige, so people won't respect you as much, but that's okay. You can also hold a feast, which is essentially just increasing how much your vassals like you, hold a summer fair, where you can get some money, reduce peasant panic and that sort of thing, so reduce rebellions, or you could go on a grand hunt, try to get some good traits. All very useful. And these also have time limits, so you can't go and hold a feast until November. You can't hold a summer fair if the month is before May. Yes, if the month is before May or after August, and you can't go on a grand hunt unless it's between September and November. You could also buy an indulgence for your sins, which is very important if you've managed to get yourself excommunicated from the church. And you didn't want to be excommunicated from the church. Sometimes you'll want to be. And the reason you sometimes will want to be is because if you are, you can always declare an antipope, and thus there would be two popes. Very nice. So you've got factions as well. So there's factions in your home duchy, and then there's factions in your kingdom, or your empire, if you happen to be part of the Holy Roman Empire, etc. You can start these factions, and they basically just have different goals. So, say you want seniority succession, you could back that, Gavelkind, or you could lower crown authority, or if you thought you were strong enough, you could declare independence. So there we go. Right now you can see that we actually are strong enough. We provide 57.1% of the troops of England. We could declare independence if we wanted to, but we won't. You can lead two of these factions, and as it says there, choose wisely. So how do you expand your realm? It's probably going to be the last thing that we touch on before giving the game a score. How do you expand your realm? Well, there's several different ways. If we go to the Kingdom of France and click on this province here, we see that this is the King of France himself. King of France himself. If we go to conduct diplomacy against him, you can see we can declare war. You cannot declare war in this game without a valid reason. You need a valid reason. So we could do that to claim the County of Artois, because we have a personal claim on it. Or we could claim a barony of Châtillon for one of our vassals, because they have a claim on it. Or we could claim Vermandoy because we have the Duchy of Valois, and we have these two provinces, so we could declare war for that. There's other reasons you could declare war, one of them being an invasion. We can't do it with them. We can't actually conduct an invasion at the moment. That is the third and final use I've ever found for piety. You can request an invasion if you have at least 500 piety, and if you have less titles and land than the person you're attacking. The Pope obviously has to agree to give you sanction to do that, but it's another way of declaring war if you wanted to. Though, of course, we wouldn't declare war on our good friend Kaiser Franz because he's our son-in-law. Very important. You could also declare a holy war against the Muslims, so the infidel, or if somebody is excommunicated, you can declare a war to topple them. There's obviously civil wars, in which case, you'd be pressing a claim for a particular piece of land, etc. But that's essentially how you can expand your realm. Obviously, I'm not going into a huge amount of detail here because it's a review, not an in-depth look at. If people want to do an in-depth look at, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to do a series on it. Maybe we could put it on game level, etc. So, what happens when you actually conquer something? This will definitely be the last thing we touch on, promise. It's coming up on 25 minutes now. Well, just over 25. Anyway, what happens once you've conquered it? Well, that's good that we know that, because we happen to have a few freshly conquered provinces here. If the province is not of your culture, so in this case, they're not, they're Frankish, we're Norman, you get this: recently conquered different culture. It's a penalty on your levy size, how much money you'll make from it, and how much levy reinforcement you get. So basically, it cripples your army, it cripples your economy. This is so you can't just conquer some place and then steamroll on. You have to have some cultural similarities. Otherwise, you get crippled. Which is a good mechanic, because, you can't raffle stomp everybody. The other one is recently conquered normal. Recently conquered normal is just a base thing that stops you from having levies, money, or levy reinforcement. So that's what happens. If you conquer a place that's the same culture as you won't get this one. You'll just have the short-term one, which goes for a very short time. I think the period is 5 years, as opposed to the 30 years for this. Oh, it's only 10 years for us because they're of a similar culture to us. They're of the same culture group. If it was somebody, say, Muslims, should have some down here. Is there a recently conquered place? I don't think so. Recently conquered. I don't think we've got one. No? Aha! There we go. Alright. Recently conquered. They conquered this almost 20 years ago. It does not expire until 1185. That's a long time. Plus they've got the religious penalty as well. That happens if you conquer a place that's not of your religion, so you will occasionally get all three. There might be a place here with all three. I don't know. Maybe not. No, actually, on second thoughts, I don't think there is. But that's a basic overview of how the game works, and you play from 1066 to 1453. As a family, doing shenanigans. It's a good game. So, let's give it a score. I'm going to give it, for gameplay value, a 9 out of 10. Now, admittedly, I'm biased because I love these sort of games, but I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because it's always different every single time you play it. You'll never play the same game twice, and that's brilliant. It's fresh, it's invigorating, it's fun. For audio quality, I give it a 8. Some of the music can be a little bit on the annoying side because it plays again and again and again and again and again. because remember, you're playing this game for almost 400 years. That's a lot of hours to sink into a single game. It's not a bad game, but that is a lot of hours to sink into a single game, and the same music again and again and again and again and again gets a bit irritating. But that's okay. There's not really a plot, so I won't give it a plot score, so we'll just stick with the gameplay and audio. Which brings us to the final question, is it worth it? Totally. Why? Well, because you don't need any of the DLC to keep playing. If your friends have all the DLC, but you only have the base game, that's fine. You don't need the DLC. You can still play with them. They'll just have a few more options than you do. And that really sells it for me. There's no requirement to have DLC. You can have the base game and have as much fun as you like. And it's brilliant. So, we'll wrap up here. This has been GreyHunter reviewing for Game Level TV, and I will pop the link for my channel's LP of this game into the description box below. If you want to come by and have a visit, have a look at it, cool. If you want to come by, have a visit and tell me, hey, I want you to make a series about how to play this game that's a bit more in depth, also cool. Tell me, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. I love teaching people how to play this game. But anyway, as I was saying, I went over my 30 minutes time limit. Derp. But anyway, this has been GreyHunter reviewing for Game Level TV, and I will see you guys in the next review. GreyHunter out.